This video is so important because this gentleman named Cliffe exposes this other gentleman who is a secular humanist. He exposes some of the fundamental problems with atheism and secular humanism, and it has to do with value system. It has to do with language, and it's very interesting how Cliffe goes ahead and intricately unties some of these misunderstandings and conceptions that people like this do have. So with that being said, let's check it out. This is intriguing.
Well, I was hesitant to stand up anyway, but I would actually like to ask two questions, and they're coming from my heart. Okay?
Okay.
As someone who has been raised outside of the church, and I just don't take the Bible as evidence, is there any way that I could be converted? Is that the only way that you can reach out to someone that doesn't have any kind of cultural upbringing, that hasn't been raised with already those doubts? How can you speak to someone who's absolutely legitimately an atheist? Please answer directly.
I have many friends who are former atheists. And these people who are former atheists relax their mind. They tried to be as objective as possible and to look at the evidence that God exists. And then once they move from atheism to theism, then they relax their mind. They tried to be as objective as possible and read the Gospels, not as the Word of God, simply as accurate history, because the evidence is the Gospels give us some accurate history. And confronted by the lifestyle, teachings, death, and resurrection of Christ, they saw the evidence is Christ is reliable, and they chose to put their faith in Him.
So you said that there were two steps there. The second step, once you've acknowledged that there could be some sort of all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good thing, once you've done that, that's fine. It's that first step that I'm really concerned with. So you're saying that there's actually fact-based evidence that is best explained through an existence of God.
Philosophical evidence, yes, sir.
I'm not talking specifically about experiments or anything like that, but even philosophical evidence.
Philosophical evidence.
You think that's the best, most rational explanation?
Yes.
Okay, so we have thousands of years of history of debates about these kind of things, and I don't want to revisit those. But do you have an answer for someone who's already gone through those and hasn't been convinced of the factual accuracy or of Occam's razor? I mean, if I honestly think that there are just more reliable descriptions that match the facts better, theory that just has fewer things that you have to assume that explain it just as well. If I'm in that position, knowing that I am a limited person and could be wrong, is there room for faith? That was kind of a technical question. Would you like me to try to repeat it? Mm-hmm. So, do you think that it's possible to both think that the best answer is atheism, that I can logically disprove the existence of the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, yet, through knowing my own limitation, through knowing that logic itself can be flawed, that our brains cannot understand everything, is that enough of a doubt to admit the kind of faith that's required to believe in God?
Sir, all you've got to do is look at the evidence for the reliability of Christ. Then you say, no, I'm sorry, not enough evidence. I can't believe. But when you say that, what you are clearly saying is, before I trust anything to be true, it must meet this level of evidence. So my two questions for you then are, in light of the fact that Jesus Christ is not supported by enough evidence, what is the object that you have chosen to trust in? And secondly, what is the preponderance of evidence that supports this option as being more reliable than Christ?
I would say that the discussion isn't between two different things that explain the environment that we see, but it's a very specific proposition of either an all-knowing, all-powerful God exists, or it doesn't. And I believe that the evidence supports the second. And I don't think that you need to, that argument specifically requires there to be something else that you believe in. Just like, you can talk about the non-existence of something. If it logically would impact your life in some way, and it doesn't impact your life in that way, then it doesn't exist, without positing something else instead.
Tonight, when you put your head on your pillow, tonight when I put my head on my pillow, like it or not, you are living for something or someone. Like it or not, I'm living for someone or something. You have said the reason that you cannot believe in Christ is because of a lack of evidence.
No, I said an evidence against. That's a very important difference.
All right, fine. Evidence against.
Okay.
So what I need to challenge you to do is explain to me what or who you are living for and why. What's all the evidence that points to whatever the option is you've chosen other than Christ? What's this overwhelming evidence that has convinced you that this option is more trustworthy than Christ?
Well, we're talking about two different things here, and I'm trying to answer your question. This is the only way I know how. I'm talking about whether something exists or not, and you brought in value. You brought in why are you living? What are you living for? Why are you good? Something like that. Like, what is your purpose? And the question that I was asking was very much about what exists. And if God does not exist, frankly, if nothing above me exists, that doesn't imply that I have nothing to live for.
Right.
Yeah, and I do definitely have things to live for that I can specifically point to that have nothing to do with whether there's a God.
Right. That's right. I know that.
Okay, then I don't understand why there's a connection there.
For some reason, you and the two gentlemen before, I'm not sure that you guys respect language the way I do.
How do you mean?
I agree with those who say that language can just be a power move to assert your power. And that happens at times. But I'm convinced that if we take language seriously and if we listen to each other, we can have meaningful conversation. I thought I just said to you, tonight, when you put your head on your pillow, like it or not, you're going to have to acknowledge you're living for something or someone.
Yes.
Like it or not, when I put my head on my pillow tonight, I'm going to have to acknowledge I'm living for someone or something.
I agree with that.
We both have faith. Now, you have said to me crystal clearly that there is not enough evidence that God exists, and you didn't want to hear me go over that evidence, and I respect that. And you have also clearly said that there's not enough evidence that Jesus Christ is reliable. Fine, no problem. But when you say to me, the reason you can't believe that God exists, the reason you can't believe that Jesus Christ is the truth is because of lack of evidence, in order not to be an intellectual hypocrite, I'm asking you, what do you live for, and what's this preponderance of evidence that convinces you that this option is superior to God, to Christ?
I can answer the question. I just didn't think it was relevant to the conversation. I believe in flourishing, in human flourishing, in eudaimonia. I believe that we have goodness in our lives, that there are good things to experience, good things to learn and be. I mean, there is an inherent goodness to human life that has no relationship with anything higher than humanity. And once you acknowledge that there's something higher than humanity, it belittles us. I specifically, just so I don't get off topic, that what I live for is flourishing.
Who defines flourishing?
I do, for myself.
Fine. And the KKK defines flourishing for themselves.
That's fine.
It's
that doesn't
fine?
mean they're right.
And the terrorists who bombed and shot people in Paris define flourishing for themselves.
Yeah, but now you're making, so you asked what I live for. You did not say, do I believe in some sort of absolute good?
I did not. I asked you, how do you define flourishing? Who defines flourishing?
We each define flourishing.
Okay. Now, if you think about it, you're going to realize you've thought it one way, define flourishing one way. The terrorists have obviously defined it another way. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong, it's all relative.
I'm not talking about ethics. That's why I said this was outside of the realm of the conversation. This is an ethical
Flourishing does not include ethics?
Excuse me?
Flourishing does not include ethics?
You asked what I live for.
Yeah, flourishing, you said.
Yeah, that's not an ethical statement. That's a
Does
psychological
that include
statement.
ethics? To flourish as a human being, does that include understanding what's good? I thought you used the word goodness.
It includes goodness. It doesn't understand it does not include the understanding of goodness.
It includes goodness, but not the understanding of goodness.
My moral imperative is
language is breaking down.
No, my moral imperative is to flourish. My moral imperative is not. It does not include having some sort of ultimate goodness. I don't have that claim on reality.
Okay, just very quickly. This is exactly what I was talking about in the very beginning, that language is breaking down here. As this gentleman, the secular humanist, says, flourishing includes goodness, but it does not include the understanding of goodness. And I'm sorry, but that's one of the most contradicting statements that I have ever heard, with all respect. So how can something be labeled as good, that being the type of flourishing this man is talking about, and yet the good that comes from his humanistic flourishing, he says, also does not come with the understanding of what good is or what good means. Okay, that's a breakdown of language, and that exposes the error that he's trying to run away from the idea of value and what value in his human way of thinking, what it might apply to or what it might point to, which is an ultimate standard. All right, let's keep going.
The language is breaking down.
No, my moral imperative is to flourish. My moral imperative is not, it does not include having some sort of ultimate goodness. I don't have that claim on reality. I just said earlier in my honest question, one that I've asked of priests in the past when I was really questioning. My honest question is faith compatible with this idea? That's a very specific question. Okay?
With flourishing?
With the fact that my logic is limited. I could be wrong. I know that I could be wrong. Whether you take that same idea and apply it to flourishing, yes, I am going to do my utmost to be a good person, but that does not mean that I know what good is. I don't lay any sort of claim to absolute goodness.
Like it or not, you have to make a judgment call on what the terrorists did in Paris. They define that as flourishing, as their goodness. Now, you just can't live in a vacuum and say, well, it really doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. You have to make a judgment call. Is that right or wrong? You have to make a judgment call. Is the KKK right or wrong in denigrating black people and elevating Aryan supremacy? You can't just live in a vacuum and say, well, it's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It's real life. So who defines flourishing? And if you define it, then what makes your definition right and the KKK or the terrorist definition wrong?
Okay, so the simple question that we have to ask secular humanists or people that live their life like this with this worldview or atheists is, how do you know that the way that you live your life is good for humanity? Cliffe exposed this gentleman's worldview as this man tried to escape dialogue about value because he knows that it implies a standard. And he doesn't want to deal with standards or absolutes because he knows if he says the word value, he knows that it implies a standard. But Cliffe, what he does is he didn't let this happen because human flourishing implies a standard unto itself. So at the end of the day, there is an innate value attached to how we choose to live our lives, which means now that a worldview without God has to explain what value is. It's almost a circus act to jump through the hoops of semantics to try and get away of any statement that sounds like there's value in it, to get away from moral absolutes. So this worldview, it has to explain where value comes from that we see innately within mankind, why it's important, and so on. And I believe a worldview with God gives a justifiable answer way better than any other worldview could. So now in closing, the last thing that I wanted to address was the gentleman's question to Cliffe is faith simply coming from the belief of what I don't know, where he said, I understand humans are limited in their knowledge, and I have all of this evidence that I believe in that points me away from God. So is faith actually going to be something that I can attain or ascertain, and is it going to come from my limited knowledge? No, that's not what faith is. Christianity and Christian faith is faith in the evidence of something, the faith in the evidence of what Christ gave us. It's not faith in what you don't know. Okay, so this is something that needs to be addressed and fixed and corrected. So these are just things to be aware for and watch, and pray for people like this. Pray for yourself because, hey, no judgment, no condemnation. We have our own flaws and blind spots, and we need Christ and the Holy Spirit every day to show us these things. With that being said, have a blessed day.